The hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin as passengers settled into their seats, tucking away their belongings and adjusting their seatbelts. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air as a flight attendant moved through the narrow aisle, ensuring that everything was in order before takeoff. Outside the window, the golden hues of the setting sun painted the sky, casting a warm glow over the plane's interior. And then, just as everything seemed calm, a sharp voice broke through the low murmurs. "Hey! That's my seat." A few passengers turned their heads, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Others ignored the outburst, too focused on their own routines. But the tension in the air was undeniable. Standing in the aisle was a young man, his blonde hair slightly tousled, his jaw clenched in irritation. He was wearing an expensive yellow t-shirt, fitted jeans, and a designer watch that glistened under the cabin lights. His expression was one of pure entitlement as he glared down at the elderly black man sitting quietly in the window seat. The older man's silver-white hair contrasted sharply against his dark skin, his face calm and composed, his hands resting gently on his lap. "I believe this is my assigned seat," the elderly man said, his voice steady but kind. The young man hesitated, staring at the photograph of the elderly man in his military uniform. For the first time since this flight began, he felt unsure of himself. "You were in the Air Force?" he asked, his voice quieter now. The elderly man nodded, his fingers tracing the edges of the old photo. "Yes. Many years ago. I was stationed in Thailand during the war." The young man shifted in his seat, glancing at the elderly man with new curiosity. "That must have been intense." The old man gave a small, knowing smile. "It was. But not in the way people think. War teaches you things. Not just about survival, but about respect, patience, and humility. It shows you what truly matters." The young man swallowed. Something about the way he said it made the young man feel small, his earlier outburst suddenly seemed childish in comparison. He glanced away, uncomfortable. The elderly man carefully flipped through his notebook, revealing another photograph tucked between the pages. This one showed a much younger version of himself standing beside a woman and a small boy. "Your family?" the young man asked. The elderly man nodded, his smile tinged with sadness. "My wife and son. Taken before my first deployment. I promised them I'd come back." The young man hesitated before asking, "And did you?" The old man exhaled deeply, his gaze distant. "I came back, but I wasn't the same man who left." For the first time, the young man didn't know what to say. He had never really thought about the weight people carried, the things they endured long after the battles were over. "Do you still fly?" he asked, searching for a lighter topic. The elderly man chuckled. "Not anymore. But I still love the sky. There's something about flying, it reminds you how small we are in this world." The young man looked out the window, seeing the endless stretch of sky in a way he never had before. He exhaled slowly. "Look, he hesitated. Apologizing wasn't something he did often. The elderly man just waited, patient as ever. "I was a jerk," the young man admitted. "I shouldn't have acted like that back there." The elderly man simply nodded. "We all have moments we're not proud of. What matters is what we do next." The young man scoffed. "No. I always book the window seat. I need the space, and I need the view." He crossed his arms, his frustration growing. "You can move to the aisle." A few more passengers glanced over now, their interest piqued. Some whispered among themselves, while others simply watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Before we continue, if you love powerful life lessons and thought-provoking stories, make sure to subscribe to King of Tales and turn on notifications. These stories will change the way you see the world, don't miss out. Now, let's get back to this unforgettable moment. The elderly man sighed, but his expression remained composed. "Son, I understand you may prefer this seat, but my boarding pass clearly states that this is where I am assigned." The young man rolled his eyes, shaking his head. "Seriously? Do you even know how much I paid for this ticket? You expect me to sit in the aisle?" At that moment, a flight attendant approached, sensing the tension. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her voice professional but firm. The young man turned to her, exasperated. "Yeah, this man took my seat." The flight attendant took the elderly man's boarding pass, scanned it, and nodded. "Sir, your seat assignment is correct. There's been no mistake." The young man clenched his jaw, staring at the elderly man as if expecting him to just move anyway. But the older man held his gaze, unwavering. Finally, with an annoyed sigh, the young man plopped down into the aisle seat, shaking his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. The plane took off. The young man sulked, scrolling through his phone, ignoring everything around him. But then, something unexpected happened. The elderly man reached into his bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. As he flipped through the pages, a photograph slipped out, landing on the young man's tray table. The young man picked it up instinctively. It was old, slightly faded, showing a younger version of the elderly man, dressed in a military uniform, standing next to a plane much like the one they were on. "You were in the military?" the young man asked, curiosity overriding his annoyance. The elderly man nodded. "Air Force. Many years ago." The young man hesitated. "My grandfather was in the Air Force," he admitted, his tone softer now. The elderly man smiled knowingly. Then he understood discipline, patience, and respect. He looked at the young man with kind eyes. "Sometimes, we get so caught up in what we think we deserve that we forget to appreciate what we already have." The words hit harder than the young man expected. He swallowed, suddenly feeling small in comparison to the life the man beside him had lived. For the rest of the flight, he remained silent. But as they landed and passengers began gathering their belongings, he turned to the elderly man. "Sir. I'm sorry," he said sincerely, his voice barely above a whisper. The elderly man patted his shoulder gently. "It's never too late to learn, son." As the young man walked off the plane, he realized something. This moment, this brief encounter with a man he had tried to dismiss, would stay with him forever. And that, my friends, is why respect is something money can't buy. Life has a way of teaching us humility, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to King of Tales, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a moment that changed your perspective? Let us know. We'd love to hear your story. See you in the next one.